party?
It's not a sleep party, but somebody could bring pizza and beer.
Pizza.
I'm down for that.
I'll bring beer.
Don't bring no nasty tasting beer either. Bring something worthwhile.
What's your favorite?
Favorite? Don't know that I have a favorite. But if I'm gonna drink it, I want it to be worth my time.
Dos Equis.
Dos Equis? Is that what you said? Okay, fair enough. That's what you have to
Michelob.
do. What?
Michelob.
Michelob. Let me tell y'all a story. Way back in the day when I was in the Navy, and this was a long time ago, you could be on a Navy base and go and buy beer out of the soda machine. Oh, it was great. You go down to go down to one of the buildings on the base and play pool and just walk over to the soda machine and put your 4 quarters in there and get your Michelob if that's what you wanted. It was great. You played pool all afternoon, get dollar beer or whatever. You cannot get those in the soda machine anymore. Anyway, moving on, we're dealing with the second half of chapter 4, unless I'm mistaken. We were left off right before we started talking about sleep, the fact that y'all don't get enough. Generally speaking, I would suspect that most of us generally don't typically get enough sleep. How many of you sleep less than, we'll say, 6 hours or less a night? Yeah. Okay. Now, how many of those folks have children? Okay, the folks over here, all right. Now, just for the sake of argument, okay, we're good. You can put your hand down. I'm certainly not going to be one to be critical of how many hours you decide to sleep or not sleep. I can tell you what happens to your body when you don't get enough. And I've been in both positions. You need adequate sleep. The key word here is adequate. You're going to have to let somebody in, please. Whatever is adequate for one person may be not enough or over enough for someone else. You never know. Generally speaking, however, most of us do much better, I'll put it that way, do much better when we have closer to 8 hours. Surprise, surprise. Now, I know the majority of you are going to tell me 8 hours of good sleep any one particular night is virtually impossible. Fair enough. You do with what you do what you can with what you got to work with. I understand that. But in general, a little more sleep is going to be a little bit better. Now, there are a handful of ways you can look at notions of sleep. There are 4 or 5 stages, if that's how you want to look at them. One of those stages is what we call the awaking phase, when you're just kind of chilling, thinking about the notion of going to bed or going to sleep anyway. 2, 3, and 4, we actually can classify them as slow wave sleep. REM sleep tends to be a little more active, if not much more active. You do cycle through a sleep pattern that is roughly 90 minutes, give or take a few, depending on the person. It cycles all night, or let me rephrase, it cycles whenever it is you sleep. If you happen to be one of those lucky ones who gets to sleep at night, it cycles better for you. Sleeping in the daytime, people typically don't rest quite as well. As you age, and when I say age, when you get to be as old or older than I am, sleep patterns begin to change. A lot of older folks don't require as much overall REM sleep and don't enter REM sleep like most folks. They tend to need less sleep. Most what I would call senior citizen type folks run on 6 hours or so of sleep, give or take a little bit, and tend to do just fine. I can't tell you why it is that older folks don't need to rest as much. Couldn't say. But I also know that babies' sleep patterns are opposite those of us who are grown. They spend much more of their time in REM sleep until about between the ages of 6 months and a year or so, it begins to change and becomes much more like the cycle that you and I would use. What is the purpose of rest or the purpose of sleep? Anybody? Brain function. It helps you, and there was something in the back, what was it? It helps repair and growth. If anybody knows any other folks who are gym rats, we call them, folks who are overly physically active, bodybuilders, those types of folks, they work out and sleep. That's what they do. People who are professional in that way, they work out, they eat, and they sleep. They go home between workouts and nap and eat and go back to the gym again or wherever it is they go. Sleep is a wonderful tool to help your body rejuvenate itself. It helps it heal. It helps itself rebuild. It is wonderful for brain function. Here's another wonderful study tip. When it comes to sleep, the more you have on a consistent basis, the better your ability to recall information. Now just let that sit there for a second.
Can you repeat that again?
I can. May not be the exact same words, but I can get to the same meaning. The more consistent rest or sleep you get, the better your ability to recall information. Now, the practical application for that is real simple. For those of you who choose to cram, to use that word, for tests versus individuals who sleep more over a longer period of time, I promise you the ones who study less amounts of time over longer periods of time compared to those who try to cram all night for an exam, the ones who study in shorter episodes over longer term will do far, far better than those who cram overnight. You'll waste an awful lot of your physical energy not going to sleep. One of the other pieces that's wonderful for sleep is that it helps memory consolidation, which means it helps it move from shorter term to longer term. Study, I've mentioned this 1,000 times probably across the last however many years. It really wouldn't apply in this class because you always have access to your materials when it comes to testing. But let's talk about your English class, for example. If you will read through, when I say read, I actually mean more of a scan. If you will scan through your English notes every day, 5 days a week, just scan through them over the amount of material that you know you're going to be on the next test. Just scan through that and then forget about it. Don't worry about it anymore. Scan those notes once a day and you'll be absolutely amazed at what you can reproduce memory-wise when it comes test time. If you stay up all night the night before trying to shove it in there and memorize it so you can puke it back up again, it's not going to work. You're going to sit down to take your test and go, what class is this? I'm supposed to remember what? It doesn't work like that. Regardless of what some of your experience may tell you, I'm speaking in broad, general terms, and what I mean is that over time, we recall material better when we have a little bit of sleep. Try me on this. Give it a whirl and see if it works for you. Some of us deal with insomnia or the inability to go to sleep or the inability to stay asleep once we've gone to sleep. And that has much more to do with other physiological issues, not just body function like having to go and make a pit stop or whatever. If you don't want to get up in the middle of the night to go make a pit stop, don't drink so much before you go to bed, regardless of what it is you drink. Doesn't really make any difference. Go drink a big old glass of water on your way to bed, you're going to get up in the night. Generally. Not everybody, but most folks will. You have different disorders related to sleep patterns. One of those disorders is a condition referred to as narcolepsy. It is a condition when the body simply nods itself off to sleep. And it does not matter the context. Might be in the classroom, sitting along, everything's cruising along just fine. The next thing you know, you've dropped off to sleep. Now, is it possible that folks would drop off to sleep in anybody's classroom? Yes, but that may not be narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is not controllable. Those folks I know who have been in general psychology class who hang tight for about 10 or 15 minutes and they do this, that's not narcolepsy. That's acting a fool and going to sleep. That's different. Individuals who have narcolepsy cannot control when it is they go to sleep. They only have to be physically still long enough for that to happen. I've known more than one person be driving down the highway and drop off to sleep. Trust me, that's a dangerous thing if you have narcolepsy and try to drive. Because chances are you'll drop off to sleep and either hurt yourself or kill yourself or someone else. Take somebody with you if you're prone to narcolepsy. Another disorder that accompanies narcolepsy is a condition referred to as cataplexy, which means that when we drop off to sleep, we lose all muscle tone. We're done. You drop off to sleep, you're going to fold up in half. If you're driving, you're just going to be hung up behind the steering wheel. Those two things run together. They can also be separate, but there's all kinds of fun stuff that deals with difficulties related to sleeping. I bet some of you have parents who have a condition referred to as sleep apnea, more than likely your dad's versus your mom's, but women do have sleep apnea. So some sort of obstruction of the airways that keeps people from sleeping well. They tend to wake up numerous times during the night, whether or not they are aware or not. For people to get a real good diagnosis for that, they usually undergo a sleep study in a hospital setting where they can monitor one's physical awakeness versus asleepness. My father-in-law had horrible sleep apnea for years and years and years. And then they realized, oh, homeboy can't sleep at night. They didn't even keep him for the entirety of his sleep study. They kept him for an hour or two and sent him home. Said, Mr. Armstrong, you can get up and go home now. Well, I've been asleep. Oh yeah, you've been asleep. And not. He woke up that many times. It wasn't worth them running any more experiment on him. They just sent him home. He had to come back and get his CPAP machine. Technology has changed greatly since he was alive. Modern, what I would call much more contemporary CPAP machines are virtually silent. They sound like a little bit of a wind machine, very quiet, like a little fan, and it forces air down the person's throat so that not only do they not snore, it keeps them breathing in a normal rhythm. And if you've ever been around someone who doesn't rest because they don't sleep well, the first time they start to sleep well, you notice, as do they. It's a wonderful thing to get fixed if you're having trouble sleeping. Another condition that deals with children on at least a partial basis is a condition referred to as sudden infant death syndrome. We also call it SIDS. Typically that occurs with little bitty infant types, usually in some sort of abnormal sleep pattern. Is it possible that a child would get bunched up in a blanket and smothered? Yes, it will typically be credited to SIDS. It may be caused by some sort of genetic concern, a brain system malfunction, cigarette smoke exposure, all kinds of things can create sudden infant death syndrome. About half of all SIDS cases might be caused by accidental suffocation, but it's always very hard to know. Anybody sleepwalk? Sleepwalkers are fun, unless it's one of your little children and they're trying to get out of the house, which also can occur in some circumstances. My wife was a sleepwalker when she was very young. The best story she ever told, and my mother-in-law told it to me more than once, she had left her upstairs bedroom. Her mother was on her tail on the way down the stairs as Rebecca was headed out through the hallway, through the kitchen, out the back door in the middle of black night. She finally got her to stop as she was headed out the back door. She said, "Rebecca, what are you doing?" "I'm going after my hair." Whatever it was she was dreaming, she had left her bed and was chasing her hair and was no more awake than the man in the moon. She had no recollection of any of those events. Of course, her folks were trying to tell it to her the next day, and she thought they were nuts. On another occasion, she went from her bedroom, walked into her folks' bedroom, literally jumped up on the bed, right square in the middle of her dad, straddled his chest, and sat there for half a second and said, "Hi there," to which her father responded with, "Honey, do you need a drink of water?" Once he cleaned himself up. "No." "Then why don't you go back to bed, sweetie?" So she did. No recollection whatsoever. One of my children sleepwalk, or would sleepwalk occasionally, living in the same house, actually. How we would catch her, when we first realized that something was askew, we put a motion detector on the bottom of the stairwell so that when she passed through that particular spot, if she got that far, that light in the hallway would come on and wake me up. Because if somebody flips on a light anywhere close to where I am, I'm usually going to wake up. She'd come moseying down the steps, whatever it was she was trying to do in her sleep. That light would come on and I'd catch her before she got out of the hall. Literally, just kind of grab a hold of her shoulders, check in with her, make sure she's all right, redirect her back up the steps, and up the steps she would go and right back to bed, like nothing was ever wrong. Never has any recollection of any of that. You'll have to let her back in. Okay. So sleepwalking can be really fun. Again, unless you have someone who's trying to escape and manages to escape before they wake up. Now, that type of condition also occurs in some individuals who have another condition that's referred to as dissociative or a dissociative disorder of some sort. And that is when an individual, we'll talk about this in another chapter. It's a disorder when people lose track of time. During that loss of time, they may not be aware of who they are, where they are, or what it is they do. It's an interesting disorder. It basically involves multiple personalities that exist inside one person. How those personalities come to exist, typically, not always, but typically it's related to some sort of trauma. And you'll find that they wake up in various places or circumstances, not knowing how it is they got there. I did some therapy work with a young lady once upon a time, woke up